This is E&P Reports, a service of Editor and Publisher Magazine. Since 1884, the authoritative voice of news publishing. And hi, once again, this is Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine. This is a special edition of E&P Reports because it's very timely. It all circles back to March when one of our industry leaders, Francis Wick, the CEO of Wick Communications, had what he calls a Jerry Maguire moment. On a Saturday morning, he woke up with this idea of offering tax incentives to help our industry survive during COVID-19 and sustain itself in the months and years to come to fund the journalism that is so necessary in our society and hopefully stop the news deserts that are being created all over our country. And those tax incentives are interesting. It's not just for you and I, the publishers and managers that pay the salaries of the journalists we employ to create that critical content we need, but how about a tax incentive to the readers who pay for our content, whether it's digital or print, and the advertisers who support us, whether we're a newspaper, a digital outlet, or even a broadcast outlet, as long as we're creating critical local journalism. It's called the Local Journalism Sustainability Act. It's in Congress as we speak. And believe it or not, it's bipartisan. It's being sponsored by a Democrat and a Republican. And it's critical that we get this moving now because there's a chance that it could be tacked on to some of the legislation going on now during COVID-19. Either way, it's an idea worth championing. And we're behind it at E&P, and the mission today is to try to get you behind it as well. So join me as we explore the Local Journalism Sustainability Act with the Jerry Maguire that kind of started this thing, Francis Wick, as I go one-on-one. Francis Wick, it's an honor to have you on E&P Reports. I have seen you at many conferences. Is it true that you're only 18 years old? That's the first question for our audience. No.
If you ask my wife, she might tell you I act that way at times.
No, you're actually, it's very fascinating. You're running a very, very cool company at a very young age. It must be fun. I mean, because this is not an industry that a lot of young people are flocking to, if you know what I'm trying to say. So I'm honored to have you in our interview today. It's great to get you exposed like this. Where are you now? Are you in your office in?
I'm in my office in Sierra Vista, Arizona, and the beauty of it is that outside we have the monsoon occurring, which is probably the most dramatic and beautiful time of year here in Southern Arizona. And there's something when the rains come and flourish the desert. There's a rejuvenation of smell that you sense outside that it brings a sense of life and balance that I've never experienced anywhere else.
So I assume that since you went to college there, you're from Arizona. Yep. If any reason, shape, form, or size, you must be a Wildcat fan. Is that correct or not, sir? I mean,
I am. Yeah,
I figured that.
My undergrad, my graduate work there, and but I enjoy good sports.
Good for you. All right, let's talk about why we're here together. We'll there's the Local Journalism Sustainability Act is so innovative. I mean, this is an idea we should have tried a long time ago. I mean, this is amazing because in a way, I want you to first give us the overview. Let me see if I'll ask you. And what you basically have brought to Congress through two House, it's bipartisan, right? You got Ann Kilpatrick, right, from Arizona.
Ann Kirkpatrick, yep.
And that's your contact. You worked with Ann on this at all? Or, I mean, did you help bring this?
I worked with Ann's staff, correct. And I can share a little bit with you on how this kind of availed itself.
And then Dan Newhouse, a Republican, God forbid, a Democrat and a Republican are working together, have found a way to help support local news by offering tax credits in three separate ways. This is the overview. Number one, a tax credit to the person who purchases the news, the subscriber, a tax credit to the person who supports us through advertising, and God forbid, a tax credit to the employer, you, who pays the salary of the people who generate the news. And that's pretty much the overview. So how did this whole thing start and where are we at with it right now?
Good question. So I'll just give you a little quick history here. In March, as everything was really collapsing through the pandemic and quarantine coming about, I had one of those moments, that Jerry Maguire moment.
Right.
I woke up early on a Saturday, and I went in front of my computer and I started to culminate solutions that the industry in journalism, really the journalism, needs to help bridge the catastrophic compounding that was occurring due to COVID. So granted, we've had a lot of timeline pressures because of the declining state of our business. I mean, this business has been declining for well over 10 years now.
Precisely.
And we need to transform ourselves, and many organizations are attempting to do so, but they're not as far along as we needed them to be. And that's the key here. And so as an example for Wick, we have a 5-year strategy. We're 18 months, almost 18 months into it, that we want enough digital-only subscribers to pay for our newsrooms. If we pay for our newsrooms with digital-only subscribers, we now have the baseline that we can build from. It's a completely different business. Well, COVID-19 eviscerated that timeline.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly frank, Wick is a lot further along than the majority of organizations.
You are.
So as I sat there, I became very, very concerned that we are going to see a proliferation of news deserts across this country that is going to be so damaging to society, to our government, and to the quality of life that we need to stand up and do something now. We need to move pride out of the way and give real solutions on how we can comprehensively change journalism for the future. And that requires the right incentive structures. So Mike, when I look at what we need for journalism and what supports journalism, I kind of think of it in 3 key stakeholders. You have, for the journalistic ecosystem, you have the reader,
right?
You have the advertiser, and you have the journalist or the organization that employs that journalist so they can do their work. And we wanted to make sure that we were focusing these efforts appropriately so that the incentives were correct. So as it relates to the subscribers, the intention is effectively for federal lawmakers to endorse the value of professional journalism, to try to rewrite the 20 years of conditioning that we've allowed for people to think that content should all be free. We know that it's not free. We know that people work hard to access this, to create this information, but we need people to understand that there is a difference in quality of information when you have a journalist who goes out, sources information, talks to different individuals to give different perspectives of a story, and tries to be objective. That's a different approach than perhaps somebody who has a beef with a local school district and has a blog. Those 2 issues are fundamentally different. And so by offering a subscriber tax credit, we're inducing subscribers to cut a check for quality journalism and participate in factual information.
Now that doesn't preclude radio and television. They simply don't have a subscriber-based revenue model. So, but if a newspaper or a news publisher, let's use that term right now, because they don't necessarily have to have a paper. If they have a subscription-based and generate local journalism, they get a tax credit, correct? So now here's on that level, first of all, you are now going to lawmakers that have to be adult enough to appreciate our founding fathers and how they framed the Constitution, to have one of the, see, there's 4 checks. It's not just 3, there's the 4th check is freedom of the press on, the dissemination of free information. These brilliant, imperfect men wrote a brilliant document, in my opinion.
Right.
Are you finding that maturity? Because they jumped on this, a Democrat and a Republican. Aren't some going, the hell with the press? I don't want to be checked? Or
so let me just clarify one other thing. This isn't, so you say news publishers is accurate, because nonprofit news organizations can benefit just the same.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because if someone writes a check to public radio.
This is about journalism.
This is about journalism.
It's about journalism. And I will share with you that of the calls that I've made to both congressional members and senators. They are adults. They want to help, and they realize that without local journalism, they are going to be challenged in how they serve their districts. They know that.
That's so comforting in a Fox News / MSNBC / CNN world to hear that they, excuse me?
That's not local news.
That's not even news sometimes. That's just opinion over opinion.
Commentary. Yep.
It's commentating. So they understand the need for them to allow for that check. See, this just makes me feel I can go to bed tonight and go, thank God we have a society like this. And they're embracing this idea of helping you.
They're hearing this idea. They're supporting this idea, but we have a lot of work to do here, Mike. So let me just get through these other two components because I think it's really important.
That's the first credit to
that's the first credit.
Actual subscriber, the one who pays for the news. Now go ahead.
That's right. Yep. The second one has to do with the fact that across this country, so many local business owners who employ locals have been damaged by COVID-19. And they are struggling to figure out how they come back and regain market share, right? E-commerce was already challenging the marketplace, but now they're trying to figure out how do they come back from it when consumers have been conditioned to buy online.
Of course.
Right? And so what we're asking federal leadership to do is acknowledge the fact that local businesses and main streets are critical to the quality of life and the health and well-being of this country. They employ locals. Those locals pay local sales tax. It adds to the municipal budgets. It then adds to the quality of life. Everything starts to improve because of it. And we're saying we need to get out there and assist these local businesses by offering them a local advertising tax credit in year one of $5,000, years 2 through 4, $2,500. And let them come out and go swinging at trying to rebuild market share in the health and vibrancy of that local economy.
And I noticed that in the bill that's being proposed, there has to be a small business under 1,000 employees, correct? It's not for the
employees,
small businesses.
Small business. And those dollars, they can go to other organizations. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go to the newspaper.
Of course.
So the newspaper may, as a byproduct, be an assist to help those businesses market themselves. But the key here is to keep those dollars locally within the ecosystem to ensure that we are helping those businesses stand up on their feet again.
All right, so we've got a tax credit for the people who want to access the news. We've got a tax credit for the advertisers that some of us are giving up on. We're just going to go nonprofit. We're going to crowdsource. We're going to do whatever we can. Where it was actually Walter Hussman, I don't know if you, when I interviewed him, who said, I'm paraphrasing, but almost that nonprofit is an oxymoron because without the profit, we don't grow. We don't innovate. Yeah. So now you're allowing for the advertising portion. Now, what about you, the employer that has to pay those salaries for the people who generate the news? The third leg of the stool. Yeah.
So the third leg of the stool is obviously the most critical to support the other two, right? The effectiveness of advertising, if businesses want to advertise with the local newspaper, or the experience and the value of the journalism that we're offering those subscribers. You got to have journalists. You have to have local professional journalists who can conduct this work and do it well to justify this investment. And so this, by all measures, allows local journalists to stay employed and the employers of those journalists to focus their efforts in transformation around quality of content. And we've lost a lot of that because over a 10-year time span and varying degrees of ownership structures and in, why people and organizations are in this line of craft, we need to ensure that we don't lose any more jobs.
So what are the metrics on that? How you're not paying, how much credit will you get for a journalist, full-time, part-time, stringer? How does this all work out?
So year one, it's 50% of the journalist's compensation up to $25,000. So meaning the maximum amount that they will focus the equation is $50,000. So year one, you can get $25,000 per employee's compensation in the newsroom. years 2 through 5, you would receive effectively $15,000.
Wow.
And you and I both know that's not paying for the newsroom.
No.
Right? That doesn't pay for everything else that we deal with. What it does is it's enough to make a difference. It's not enough to subsidize the entirety of the news organization.
Yeah, but
that's important. That is really important.
It's an amazing help. Now, is there any cap on the number of individuals that each news generating organization can do this for?
So that's I'm sure that will kind of be ferreted out a little bit further, but it's to qualify for this, you have to be an organization that has been in business for 2 years.
Okay.
So that's a key component. And given the financial structures of the industry and journalism as it is today, God bless anybody who's going to go out and hire a lot of journalists, knowing full well that this would affect it. But this will get cleaned up as further discussion occurs. But right now, it's predicated on the current level of staffing that one would have in their newsroom as of right now.
So there are still some I's to dot and T's to cross. So like for example, an automated radio station transponder in your market that says, now I can hire that receptionist who'll write a few PSAs for me and half of her salary is deductible may not qualify. There will be a way to make sure this is for pure local news, I assume.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a key piece of it. And quite frankly, that was very important to everyone involved, was that the journalist has to be in the marketplace. They have to be in the geography. You can't have a news desk in St. Louis, Missouri, covering what's going on in Lawrence, Kansas.
Right.
So
Right.
that the focus really is around local news. This is news that honors local heroes, covers school boards. I mean, we know all this.
So you came up with this in March. You woke up and had your Jerry Maguire, I'm going to write my whatever you want to call it, my thing, my idea, my whatever.
So none of these ideas, I think, are necessarily new or unique. The Seattle Times has been on the forefront of fighting for some type of government recognition that journalism is in peril. We have different state associations that have been doing
Of course.
this. America's newspapers has been standing up and saying, we need to do something. As I looked at this, what I saw was there are a lot of different approaches at hand, and some of them are very short-term, right? Some of them are for short-term relief. But we're not dealing with a short-term problem. We're dealing with a systemic issue of transformation that needs to occur without having further damage of the journalistic craft. And so I really kind of coalesced some of these ideas. The tax credit idea for advertisers, I mean, that came from Wick Communications. So Stu and Zach, they had presented that to the New York Press Association. So I really just took different pieces and I brought them together. And then I went out and I shared it with some of the trade organizations. I shared it with other press associations. And it became very apparent to me that somebody needed to take the lead and start picking up the phone.
So that was you.
I picked up the phone. I started calling lawmakers. And I immediately told them, this needs to be on your radar because we are on the verge of seeing a cataclysm of journalism across this country, which is going to be devastating to our republic. And
they were receptive. I mean, this is March. When did that call occur?
This is March going into April. And, it took, so some of my direct lawmakers, it took a couple of conversations, but the more you talk to them, the more they started to realize just how dangerous this is going to be. And what's really nice about the Local Journalism Sustainability Act is that it provides the right incentives and the right behaviors for transformation in the right way. It's not about cutting a check and padding a quarterly earning. This is, you got to get this done, and you got a 5-year window to do it. And if you don't, you're pretty much done anyways.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that's brilliant because that's one of the best ways you can get climate change changed is by offering incentives for businesses that become much more greener. I mean, this to me works. My next question is, it's now at what stage? I mean, we all back in junior high school learned how a bill gets started and how they have to make the sausage and then it goes into committees. Is this being tacked on to something right now as we speak, or is this bill going to be living on its own? Where is it at as of today?
That's a great question. So I will. I do want to acknowledge that there have been a number of stakeholders that have been involved throughout this process.
Okay.
So I'm fortunate that we had Paul Boyle provide some counsel from the News Media Alliance. And I'm not even a News Media Alliance member, but clearly there are incentives here that are appropriate for the larger organizations and membership.
And they're busy right now lobbying against Google and Facebook as we speak in Washington, trying to get us compensated for well, we're going to ask you that question in a moment. Where do you stand on that issue? But hang in there for a second. So you got the News Media Alliance, which is primary job is lobbying in DC. Let's face it, that's one of the main things they do for us.
Yeah.
Where is it at today? What are you hearing? I'm sure your phone's ringing. What update have you got?
Yeah. So right now, America's newspapers is really taking a leadership role and creating a coalition of publishers across this country to educate and lobby their local lawmakers of the importance of understanding this now.
Okay.
Our intention is to try to drive this through the goalpost as soon as possible. And there are some indications and discussions about can some of this be considered in the next round of the COVID stimulus. I know many people think it's kind of a big lift, but the way we're going at this is the more people we can educate, the faster we can educate them, the more likely it is that we are going to get an outcome that is going to be materially beneficial for journalism. And I mean, this has broad-based support from Report for America, from nonprofit organizations in journalism. So this approach is very attractive.
Well, that was my next question. Did Dave Chevron at News Media Alliance take it to his buddy over at the NAB? Because broadcast gets the same benefit, at least on the advertiser side, and in their newsrooms, I assume, for the local journalists they employ as well. So do you have dual pressure going in as well from the broadcasters, or has that not happened yet?
I can't speak on behalf of the News Media Alliance. My only contact of kind of communication as it relates to lawmakers and what the goals are is really with Paul Boyle. I mean, he's been an exceptional leader from that organization. But as it relates to the NAB, I know they have their own initiatives. There was one piece kind of going after advertising, a big advertising request for government to place in local media. And it really sounds great. And I hope it gains some traction. I know it's going to be a real beast to disseminate. Right. And my big concern, and the reason why I took a very active approach to the Local Journalism Sustainability Act, is because there are communities in this country that are losing journalists tomorrow and in a week and in a month. And they're not going to get ads from the government. Oh, yeah. Right? They're just too small. They're too far out. And that is my biggest concern, is we have to come up with a solution that serves everyone. And that's what the Local Journalism Sustainability Act does.
In March, when COVID was just breaking, we had Ken Doctor on this platform, and he made it very clear. I mean, it's obvious. He said, if you got time and you got money, you can get through this. And he said, maybe 90 days, but it's been going beyond that now. So it's critical. The reason I wanted to get you quickly into this forum so we could get the message out is I have been hearing that there is a chance it could be tacked on to some of the COVID legislation that's going right now. So if you want it, I mean, what I heard recently, just before the interview, and I did a little digging, was there are like 30 lawmakers right now that are into this. I mean, there's been some growth. This is in the House right now.
So go ahead. We're getting momentum. There is a lot of momentum here.
So what we can do as an industry now, we have some clout. I mean, let's face it, elections are important. That means support of local media is important. Yep. So when that publisher picks up a phone and calls their local representative or calls the senator, they tend to take the call, right? I mean, it's I'm calling from this So what we got to do now is get on the phone and we got to start bugging them. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. We have to educate our lawmakers. We have a goal that in the next 15 days, we want to get 100 co-sponsors in the House of the Local Journalism and Sustainability Act. We want editorials to be running throughout the country, stories to be shared throughout news pages of different newspapers, and bringing awareness of why this is such a benefit, because it's not just newspapers. And I can't stress this enough. It's about journalism. And we have a chance in a moment right now to ensure that journalism has the best chance of success to do what our founding fathers thought it would into the future. This industry right now has that chance to do it.
And if
anything, I mean, that to me is one of the biggest privileges and honors I've ever had in my career, is to be part of something like this.
So here we go. In my humble opinion, as someone who has done some lobbying, the best thing we could do is get the state associations to support this, as you just mentioned as well, because they can quickly put together their telephones, get their membership to start making the calls. So I'm assuming you've already talked to people like Steve Nixon, who runs Newspaper Association America, Newspaper Association Managers, or Lynn Brew, or is this just starting to percolate into that environment as well?
I think that's starting to coalesce, and really, I would say Dean over at
America's Newspapers
has been doing a fabulous job of his communication and outreach.
Well, he's involved in that entire network as well.
Yeah, and I know with the newspapers that we're affiliated with in those states, we've asked different press associations to send out information to all of the publishers and owners to ensure that they're reaching out. But that's kind of the disconnect. You can make the ask, but then there's the follow-up, and really making sure that somebody's picking up that phone. And it takes some time. It takes some time, but the most beautiful thing is your local federal representative will respond. They care about your newspaper.
It could also go beyond us if we could get a little bit more momentum, because if I was an advertiser in the market with a little clout, you know how they buddy up with their, when they come in for their local town halls, there are we know who they are in the towns that we serve. Those are the ones that may want to get on board on this quickly, where you say, look, by the way, there's legislation right now that give you a tax break for the local advertising with me or my competitor. That's how it could be presented to your larger advertisers, those larger car dealers that schmooze those congressmen when they come to town, right? With their little get-togethers and fundraisers and their backyard barbecues. Those are the people we got to get on board quickly. And what the heck, our readership should know, should they not? Yes. That there's a chance that you could be supporting us and get a tax break as well.
Correct. So, and there's a lot of outreach occurring right now, Mike. And you're spot on. I've asked some of our representatives in DC, some of our lobbyists, what's the likelihood of getting the Chamber of Commerce to get behind this, because it is a material impact to Main Street. I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the ecosystem that supports local journalism, right? The reader, which is the subscriber, the business activity, the business owner in the marketplace, and the employer of the journalist and the journalists themselves.
All right, so let's do the ask now. We have 190,000 media executives and influencers that are the audience of editor and publisher each month, whether it's digital or print. Let's ask them to do something. I would say, in my humble opinion, immediately call your state association manager and say, how can I help? Or get on the phone or send an email to Dean Ridings at America's Newspapers and say, what holes can I help fill? Who does not know who's on board in DC and who ain't? Because maybe one of them is someone I can help push through. And then what else can we do? Can we maybe get some ads together we could run in the paper? Maybe some emails we can push out to the larger advertisers in our community. This time is critical because if I may quote Ken Doctor, it's time and money, but guess what? This is going on longer than we thought. And there's not a lot of time.
There's not a lot of time. And we're not just trying to get something that's short-term that'll help us get to the end of the year. We're trying to create that bridge. And so to your point, all of those components are absolutely critical, Mike. And the biggest thing that I've shared, because I have peers who may not be comfortable in making that ask, is I've said to them, open the door. I'll make that ask for you. I will explain that this is bigger than just the district. This is something that is significant to our country and needs to be considered now. And there are others that are willing to do that as well. But at the end of the day, it comes down to one key goal, and that is activating everyone in this country that's associated with journalism to pick up their phone and call their local federal representatives to say, we need your support on this. And that's the best outreach that we can conduct. So editorials, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Picking up the phone, getting a hold of somebody, getting those doors open, that is crucial to the success of this act.
For those of you that might be listening to this in your car, it's the Local Journalism Sustainability Act. That it has a name right now, and it's being championed by Ann Kilpatrick. She's a Democrat, and she's out of Arkansas, right? Your
Arizona,
district, I assume?
Yeah. Ann Kirkpatrick. She's out of Arizona. Yes.
Right. And then, of course, and Dan Newhouse, a Republican from Washington State, right. Which is incredibly cool. They understand this legislation. They're championing and they're trying to get their little, coalitions together around it. If we can get this thing moving, there's a shot. And this is what I heard, that it could be tacked on to some of the stuff that's in the sausage grinder right now in DC. And that's why I wanted to get you on this.
Yeah. Thank you. And I really appreciate it. And I mean, the fact is we have to make those asks. We have to move away from the pride of asking for help and recognizing that this is bigger than us. This issue transcends what we do. And we need to do this not just for ourselves and people associated with journalism, but for our country in the future. And so, Mike, I cannot tell you how excited I am about this legislation. It sets the groundwork for us to really push this along. And if there's one thing that I would ask everyone to consider is if they need help, reach out to America's newspapers, to any of your trade associations, but don't be afraid to be bold.
What is your personal email address if they want to have you join them on the ask?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's quite long, but I'll give it to you anyways. It's Francis, Francis, .wick, W-I-C-K, at Wick Communications, that's plural, .com.
Francis.wick at wickcommunications.com. We appreciate your valuable time. I think this is brilliant. When I saw this, I flipped because I have not been thinking, I think going full nonprofit is just kind of throwing in a towel. But this is a way to use financial incentive to continue our journey and continue our mission and maybe get just that little bit of help we need so we can power through this crisis and then continue on to do our necessary task. Fund that darn newsroom and do what our core competency is. Now, I got to ask you real quick.
Yeah.
On that note,
yeah.
How are you feeling about, because you are a mover and shaker in this industry, how are you feeling about the Google, Facebook issues going on right now? Are you in favor of the legislation going on in DC?
Yeah, I think Google and Facebook are incredibly influential organizations in society and in the world.
Right.
And they've been making a lot of outreach into the industry, trying to be supportive. But in some cases, there needs to be a bigger understanding of the impacts that Silicon Valley has had on local journalism. And I think there's a lot of stakeholders trying to work on that. But ultimately, broader discussions need to occur on how do we support local journalism in a sustainable fashion in this country. And I will say, the more divided we are and fractured as publishers and as journalists in this country, the less strength we have. So I think it really needs to resonate, right? So if you look at the incentive structures for Silicon Valley and what they may incentivize over time, that's something that we need to really think about. And this bipartisan effort around the Local Journalism Sustainability Act isn't only an opportunity to save journalism in the future, it's also an opportunity to show the unification and strength of journalism together. And that is a key component for us here. And so I think there's going to be some interesting conversations over time on how everything works together from Silicon Valley to local journalism. But we are better together than we are apart.
That's well said. We're going to leave it on that note. Francis Wick, we appreciate your valuable time. We appreciate your support for the industry. I urge you to stay well because we need you to champion this on and be kind of the dynamo behind the Journalism Sustainability Act. Thank you for your valuable time, sir.